He raised his glass to toast our daughter's graduation, but instead of praising Amelia, he looked me in the eye and said, "I have decided to start a new life without you." The room froze. Silverware clattered against porcelain, the sound sharp as thunder in the stunned silence. 50 pairs of eyes darted between us. My husband of 28 years had just announced the end of our marriage, on the very night he was meant to celebrate our daughter's success. "Dad?" Amelia whispered, her voice shaking, her cap slipping slightly as if the world itself tilted under her. In the back of the restaurant sat Cassandra, the woman who had once smiled at our Christmas table, whispered in my kitchen, and pretended to be my friend while she stole my husband. Everyone expected me to break. To scream, to cry, to run humiliated from the room. Even Amelia's face was pale with shock. But I did not break. I did not even raise my voice. I smiled. Calmly, deliberately, I placed a cream-colored envelope beside his plate. "Something for you to read later," I whispered, steady, almost kind. His triumphant expression flickered. He thought he had just written the last chapter of our story. What he did not know was that I had been quietly writing my own ending, one with consequences he could never escape. And when he opened that envelope later, under the watchful eyes of family, business partners, and the live stream that carried his downfall beyond the walls of that restaurant, his face drained, his composure shattered. This is not just a story of betrayal. It is about strategy, about patience, about a revenge plan so precise, it turned his moment of power into the beginning of his unraveling. Stay with me, because you will want to see exactly how I rewrote the ending of our marriage. My name is Bianca Caldwell. I am 54 years old, and until the moment my husband shattered our daughter's graduation celebration, I believed I had lived a life built on devotion. For nearly 3 decades, I played the role of wife and mother without complaint, even when my own dreams were quietly set aside. Gregory, my husband, was a man of big ideas. He leapt from one business venture to another, chasing passions, losing money, reinventing himself with each new phase. And while he dreamed, I anchored us. I worked long hours as a finance manager. I tightened our budget when his ventures collapsed. I made sure Amelia never missed a school trip, a birthday cake, or the chance to study at the college of her dreams. Amelia was my pride. Brilliant, hardworking, charismatic like her father, but practical like me. When I watched her cross that graduation stage, diploma in hand, I felt every late night, every sacrifice, every time I told myself, maybe later, about my own ambitions had been worth it. The air smelled faintly of roses from the bouquets scattered across the hall, and for a brief moment, I thought all my waiting had been rewarded. I had delayed opening my consultancy. I had delayed personal fulfillment. All so Gregory could chase the stability he never quite found, and Amelia could soar. To the outside world, we looked perfect. The long marriage, the devoted parents, the daughter bound for success. Our friends envied us. Cassandra, yes, the very woman sitting at the back table, used to call me lucky. She once called me her mentor. She attended our Christmas parties, smiled at my husband across the living room, and told me how inspiring I was for having it all. What no one saw were the cracks. Cracks I ignored for too long, because I thought loyalty meant endurance. What no one expected was that the woman who had kept the family, afloat in silence for 28 years, was about to turn that silence into her sharpest weapon. Gregory had always been the kind of man people admired at first glance. He could walk into any room and make strangers laugh within minutes. His handshake was firm, his smile disarming, his voice smooth enough to make people lean in, as if he were letting them in on a secret. To the world, he was the picture of a devoted husband. He never forgot anniversaries. There were flowers on the table, photographs of family vacations displayed proudly, and social media posts that painted him as the man who had it all. Even our friends used to say, "Bianca, you are so lucky to have him." And in some ways I believed it. I wanted to believe it. For 28 years, I clung to the idea that charisma and charm meant loyalty. that the man who toasted me in public would never betray me in private. But Gregory's smile was a mask, one he wore as easily as he wore his tailored suits. Behind it was restlessness, dissatisfaction, a hunger that was never satisfied, no matter how much was given. When his ventures failed, I worked double shifts. When his ideas collapsed, I covered the losses with the savings I had carefully built. And yet, every time he spoke at gatherings, he made it sound as though success was his creation and stability was his gift. The truth was far colder. While he charmed investors and whispered promises into Cassandra's ear, he was siphoning our future away piece by piece. Behind the laughter, there were secret accounts. Behind the champagne toasts, whispered plans for a life without me. That was Gregory's true genius. Not in business, not in love, but in performance. And on the day of our daughter's graduation, he thought his performance was flawless. He believed that one speech would humiliate me, silence me, end me. What he did not realize was that the very audience he relied on to witness my humiliation would instead watch his mask shatter, piece by piece. The restaurant buzzed with clinking glasses and the sharp scent of champagne bubbles rising in the air. Amelia sat at the center of it all, her graduation cap slipping slightly as she laughed with friends, her cheeks glowing with accomplishment. Gregory stood, champagne flute in hand, ready to give the speech that would seal the night in memory. I thought he would speak of Amelia's achievements, the late nights of study, the internships she balanced, the bright future ahead of her. Instead, he cleared his throat, smiled at the room, and delivered a line that cut sharper than any blade. I have decided to start a new life without Bianca. The sound of silverware clattering against plates rang out like thunder. Conversations cut off mid-word, and the smell of roasted garlic and butter from the kitchen seemed to hang heavier in the stunned silence. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward me, waiting for the collapse, the tears, the outburst. Even Amelia froze, her joy draining away, replaced with a look of horror no mother should ever see on her daughter's face. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Dad, why now?" Her graduation cap tilted as if the weight of the moment had knocked it off balance. From the corner, Cassandra shifted in her chair, pretending to be invisible, though her presence screamed louder than Gregory's words. She had been invited under the guise of a family friend. Now her role was clear. Gregory expected me to shatter. He expected shouting, sobbing, a scene he could control by painting me as irrational. But I did none of that. I smiled. Calmly, deliberately, I reached into my handbag, pulled out a cream-colored envelope, and placed it gently beside his plate. "What is this?" he asked, his voice faltering, his smirk beginning to crack. "Something for you to read later," I replied, my voice steady, almost kind. Then I turned to Amelia, kissed her cheek, and said softly, "I am so proud of you, sweetheart. This day is still about you." And with that, I stood, smoothed my dress, and addressed the stunned room. "Please enjoy your meal. This day belongs to Amelia." Then I walked out, leaving Gregory clutching the envelope like a man holding his own downfall. He did not know yet that the downfall would not stay in that room alone, because the entire celebration was being live-streamed for family who could not attend. His betrayal, his timing, his unraveling had all been captured, permanent and inescapable. Looking back, the signs were always there. They were not loud or obvious at first, just faint ripples in what I thought was calm water. But once you learn how to look, you cannot unsee them. It began with small financial inconsistencies. Gregory, who once claimed he hated dealing with money, suddenly insisted on managing certain bills himself. When I asked why, he shrugged it off, saying, "You already do so much. Let me handle a little." But his sudden generosity felt out of character. Then came the late nights. He said he was working on a new opportunity, though he never explained what it was. I trusted him, the way a wife of 28 years is supposed to trust her husband. But the receipts told another story. A hotel charge in Charleston, on a night he swore he had been in Augusta. A jewelry purchase I never saw. One evening, while folding laundry, I found a crumpled receipt in his jacket pocket. Dinner for two at a restaurant we had never visited together. When I asked him about it, he smiled too easily. Client meeting. You would not have been interested, Bianca. All business talk. And then there were the whispers. A phone always face down, silenced during dinner. Texts that arrived in patterns. Too regular, too frequent. Once I walked into the room and he ended a call so abruptly, it felt almost staged. Wrong number, he claimed. I told myself not to overthink. That doubt was poison, and suspicion could rot a marriage. I reminded myself of Amelia, of the stability she needed as she prepared for her future. I swallowed the unease, forced myself to smile, and buried the questions. What I did not know was that the answers were already buried in plain sight, waiting for me to uncover them. I have worked in finance for most of my adult life. Numbers do not lie, people do. And once my doubts took root, I knew exactly where to look. It started innocently enough. One night, while Gregory was in the shower, I sat with his laptop on the kitchen counter. He had left it open, something he rarely did. The soft glow of the screen lit up the tiles, and the faint hum of the dishwasher filled the silence. A single browser tab caught my eye. Online banking. I did not pry at first. I just noted the account number, a number I had never seen connected to any of our joint accounts. The next morning, while Gregory was out, I quietly logged into our shared financial software. Years of balancing books had trained my eye to catch irregularities. And there they were. Small, consistent transfers. Always just under thresholds that would trigger suspicion. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. Over time, it added up to tens of thousands. Money siphoned out of our lives and funneled into an account meant for someone else. I could have confronted him immediately. But instinct told me that confrontation without proof would only give him time to cover his tracks. So I did what I had always done best. I documented. Every receipt. Every transfer, every email notification. I stored them in a folder on a secure drive he did not know existed. Still, I needed confirmation. That was when I turned to Diana, Gregory's sister. She had always been my ally in quiet ways, checking on me when Gregory was restless, helping with Amelia when I worked late. I showed her the records. At first, she closed her eyes and whispered, "I hoped it was not true." Then she told me something I did not know. She had seen Gregory with Cassandra once, last Christmas. He had sworn it was nothing. Now, with the documents in my hands and his own sister aware of the truth, I no longer felt like a suspicious wife. I felt like an investigator, quiet, steady, and 3 steps ahead. The trap was only beginning to take shape. The truth rarely arrives with thunder. It creeps in quietly, one detail at a time, until denial has nowhere left to hide. 3 months before Amelia's graduation, Gregory left his phone on the nightstand, unlocked. That in itself was unusual. He was always careful, always protective of that glowing screen. I told myself I would not look. But then it buzzed, once, twice, 3 times, with messages labeled simply "See." Curiosity is dangerous. But so is silence. I picked it up. What I read hollowed me out in an instant. Tomorrow night, same place. I cannot wait. She has no idea, Greg. After the graduation, you will be free. The beachfront condo is perfect. Just imagine waking up to the waves. No more lies. The name beneath the messages made my stomach turn. Cassandra Wells. The same woman who had sat in my living room sipping wine, calling me her friend. The woman I had once advised on her career, but the betrayal was not just romantic. It was financial. When I dug deeper into our accounts, the picture sharpened. Transfers to luxury jewelry stores, fine dining restaurants, deposits toward a vacation property in Savannah. Gregory was not just straying, he was building a new life. With our money. One night, as if fate wanted to confirm what I already knew, I overheard a call while passing his office. His voice low and urgent. After Amelia's graduation, I will tell her. A public setting is better. She will not make a scene. And then Cassandra's laughter floated through the speaker. and she has no idea about the money. That is her weakness. She trusts you completely. That was the moment the fog lifted. I was not imagining it. I was not paranoid. My husband of 28 years was planning to erase me from his life, publicly, cruelly, and with the woman who had pretended to be my friend. He thought my trust was my weakness. What he did not know was that it had become his fatal miscalculation. That night, I sat at my desk staring at 2 stacks of papers. The lamp cast a yellow glow across the wood, the quiet tick of the clock sounding louder than ever. On the left, divorce filings my attorney had prepared, ready to be served quietly, discreetly. On the right, a thick folder of evidence. Bank transfers, text messages, recordings, proof not only of infidelity, but of calculated deception. 2 choices lay before me. I could walk away in silence, serve him the papers, avoid the spectacle, preserve my dignity in private. That would have been the easier path, but Gregory would spin the narrative. Bianca could not handle change. Bianca was bitter. Bianca was unstable. He would use the calmness of my exit as a shield for his lies. People would pity him, not me. Or I could let him step onto the stage he had built for himself, our daughter's graduation celebration, and allow him to believe he was in control. He wanted a public audience, witnesses to my supposed humiliation. What he did not realize was that an audience cuts both ways. A performance can crown a man, or destroy him. I chose the trap. If he wanted the world to see the end of our marriage, then the world would also see the truth. But it would not be through rage or chaos. My revenge would be quiet, precise, undeniable. When I combed through the fine print of the venue contract, I found something useful. The evening was being live-streamed for family members who could not attend. His announcement would not just echo in that room, it would be recorded, permanent, inescapable. So I began to prepare. I was not going to stop his speech. I was going to let him say every word, bask in every false smile, before the mask was ripped away. The restaurant shimmered with golden light, the scent of roasted garlic and butter lingering in the air as waiters refilled champagne flutes. Amelia sat at the center of it all, her cheeks flushed with joy, her diploma resting proudly in her lap. It was her night, or at least it should have been. Gregory stood. Tall, composed, radiating the same charm that had fooled so many for so long. He raised his glass, prepared to deliver the speech that would forever stain her memory. I have decided to start a new life without Bianca. The words struck the room like a hammer. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Forks froze halfway to lips. All eyes turned toward me, waiting for the collapse he had so carefully scripted. Even Amelia froze, her joy draining away, replaced with a look of horror no mother should ever see on her daughter's face. Her voice wavered as she whispered, "Mom? What's happening?" But I did not collapse. I smiled. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into my handbag and withdrew a cream-colored envelope. Its edges were crisp, its seal unbroken. But inside, it lived the months of preparation he thought me too blind to attempt. I placed it beside his plate. Gregory stormed in less than an hour later, his face flushed, the papers clutched tightly in his hand. He slammed the door so hard the grandfather clock in the hallway rattled, as though it too had been startled by his rage. "What is the meaning of this?" he barked, waving the documents at me. "Divorce papers? On today of all days? Are you insane?" I remained seated on the sofa, my laptop closed, my hands folded neatly in my lap. I had been waiting for this moment, rehearsing it in silence for weeks. My voice was calm, measured, the very opposite of his fury. "I thought it aligned nicely with your plans," I said evenly. "After all, you wanted a fresh start after Amelia's graduation. I am simply helping to facilitate it." His voice rose higher, desperation bleeding into anger. "You had no right to ambush me in front of everyone like that." I tilted my head, studying him the way a surgeon studies an X-ray before making the first cut. "Ambush? Gregory, you chose the stage. You announced the end of our marriage at our daughter's celebration. All I did was hand you the truth." For a moment, he faltered. His eyes darted across the room, searching for an escape, a distraction, an ally who was not there. Then, clinging to bravado, he snapped, "The prenuptial agreement expired years ago. Any lawyer will tell you that." I smiled faintly, almost pitying. Actually, it did not. Section 12, the Fidelity Clause, remains active for the duration of the marriage. And you, Gregory, have been very unfaithful. The color drained from his face. For the first time, the mask slipped entirely. No charm, no smirk. Just raw panic. The look of a man realizing the trap had closed. "You recorded me?" he whispered, remembering too late the phone call I had replayed. "I did not record your private moments with Cassandra," I replied softly. "I recorded your plans to defraud me. To destroy me. Those are fair game." His knees buckled slightly, and for the first time in 28 years, Gregory Caldwell looked small. His anger sputtered into silence. For years, he had relied on charm to tilt every situation in his favor, but charm is powerless against evidence. He muttered, "The agreement is meaningless," but his voice lacked conviction. I slid a folder across the coffee table toward him. "This is a notarized copy. Section 12, the Fidelity Clause, remains valid. Your own attorney insisted on it when we married. Ironic, is it not? The very clause you thought would protect you now protects me." His hands trembled as he leafed through the pages. His face reddened when he saw the highlighted sections, the signatures, the seals. His breath grew uneven, as though each line of legal text struck harder than any words I could speak. And then I dropped the second twist. "I know about the account in Charleston. The one you thought I would never find. I have frozen it." He looked up sharply, his eyes wide, his face ashen. You cannot." "I can," I said firmly. "And I already did. Every transfer is documented. Every dinner with Cassandra, every jewelry purchase, every deposit toward that beachfront condo. It is all part of the record now." The panic in his voice rose, shrill and frantic. "You do not understand, Bianca. I was planning for us." "Stop lying," I cut in, my tone sharp for the first time. "You were not planning for us. You were planning for yourself. For you and her." As if summoned by his own betrayal, the third twist arrived. My phone buzzed on the table. It was Diana, his sister, the one person Gregory had always assumed would side with him. I answered and placed the call on speaker. "Bianca, I have decided to testify," Diana said firmly, her voice resolute. "Gregory, I saw you with Cassandra last Christmas. I gave you a chance to stop. You refused. Amelia deserves to know the truth, and so does everyone else." Gregory's face drained of color. First the prenuptial agreement, then the frozen accounts. Now his own sister had chosen to stand against him. The fortress he believed he had built was collapsing, brick by brick, under the weight of his own deceit. Gregory had always been a master of appearances. For nearly 3 decades, he lived by one rule: never let them see you sweat. But now, in our living room, sweat beaded across his forehead as his carefully crafted mask slipped away. "This is all a misunderstanding," he stammered, his voice climbing higher with desperation. "You are twisting things, Bianca. You have always been controlling. This?" He waved the papers, the receipts, the recordings. "This is just you trying to punish me because you are bitter. It would have been laughable if it were not so pathetic." "Punish you?" I said quietly, my voice calm, steady. "You punished yourself when you siphoned money out of our accounts. When you planned to humiliate me in public. When you promised Cassandra the house I worked to save." His composure cracked further. His voice lost its polish and turned jagged, raw. "You think you have won? Do you know how this will look? Our friends will believe me. They always do. They will see you as hysterical, vindictive." But even as he spat the words, his phone buzzed again. Cassandra. The name flashed across the screen like a cruel reminder of the life he had been chasing. He hesitated, hand hovering, not answering. I raised an eyebrow, my tone sharp with truth. "Even she is calling to check whether her golden ticket is slipping away, is she not?" He snapped then, slamming his hand against the wall. His voice boomed raw with fury. "You are ruining everything. Do you hear me? Everything. The walls seemed to vibrate with the force of his rage, picture frames rattling on their hooks. For years, I had lived in fear of moments like this, the temper that simmered behind the charm. But this time, I was not afraid. I stood, meeting his gaze directly, calm, unshaken. "No, Gregory. You ruined everything the moment you chose betrayal over loyalty. The moment you thought my silence meant weakness." For the first time in 28 years, his eyes betrayed him. Not power, not control, panic. The mask had fallen, and all that remained was a man grasping at the shards of his own lies. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and varnish, the kind of place where truth is not shaped by charm but by signatures, evidence, and the weight of law. Gregory walked in beside a young lawyer he had hastily hired, an associate who looked nervous, clutching a briefcase far too large for his confidence. I sat on the opposite bench with Philip Anderson, my attorney of 20 years, experienced, steady, the kind of man who did not waste words. Because the documents spoke louder than any argument, when the judge called us forward, Gregory straightened his tie, trying to summon the old performance. But his voice trembled when he introduced himself. We submitted the prenuptial agreement, the fidelity clause, and months of carefully gathered evidence. Bank transfers, receipts, transcripts of text messages. Philip spoke calmly, methodically, his tone unwavering. Gregory's lawyer stumbled through weak objections that were overruled as quickly as they were raised. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman with no patience for theatrics, adjusted her glasses and explained, "This prenuptial agreement, signed and notarized 28 years ago, remains valid for the duration of the marriage. Section 12, the fidelity clause, has been breached. The evidence of extramarital affairs and undisclosed accounts substantiates the claim. The joint accounts will remain frozen pending full discovery. The family home, as stipulated, remains in Mrs. Caldwell's possession. Assets not properly disclosed will be considered marital property, subject to redistribution." Gregory shifted in his seat, his face crimson, his jaw clenched. His lawyer whispered furiously, but it was useless. The gavel struck like thunder. Gregory opened his mouth to protest, but the judge silenced him with a single glare. "Mr. Caldwell, your grievances are not with this court. They are with your own choices." As I rose to leave, Gregory caught my arm. His voice was hoarse, broken, trembling with defeat. "Bianca, please. We can fix this. 28 years, does that not count for something?" I met his eyes, calm as ever. It did. Until you decided it did not. And for the first time, he seemed to understand. Charm, manipulation, and threats no longer held power. The law had spoken, and the reversal was complete. Word spread quickly, carried on whispers and curious messages. Friends who once toasted Gregory at dinner parties now called me in hushed tones, some offering sympathy, others fishing for gossip. I gave them nothing more than a single line. "Gregory and I are separating. These things happen." Silence, once seen as weakness, had become my greatest shield. Amelia's loyalty was fierce. One evening, her voice cracked with anger as she told me, "I cannot even look at him. He hugged me that morning, told me how proud he was, and all the while he was planning to humiliate you." Her words cut deeper than his betrayal ever could. I took her hand gently. "He is still your father," I reminded her. "Your relationship with him is yours to decide. Do not let his betrayal of me decide your future with him," she nodded slowly. But her jaw remained tight. The weight of disillusionment etched across her young face. Meanwhile, Gregory's carefully built world collapsed without my hand steadying it. Cassandra packed her bags within weeks. The shimmer of stolen evenings dulled once the accounts were frozen, the jewelry stopped, and the beachfront dream evaporated. She told friends she had not signed up for legal trouble and dwindling funds. His business partners, once eager for his charisma, began to distance themselves. The man they once called magnetic now seemed desperate. Without me quietly balancing the chaos, his ventures sputtered. Creditors circled like vultures. Even his phone, once buzzing with invitations, now sat silent. I, on the other hand, began reclaiming pieces of myself I had set aside for decades. I rented a small office downtown, the scent of fresh paint mixing with the lilies Amelia placed on my desk. There, I opened Caldwell Financial Transitions, a consultancy for women navigating financial upheaval, divorce, widowhood, reinvention. My first clients came quietly, by word of mouth. Women who whispered, "I heard what you did. I want to feel that strong too." And I told them, with the steady voice of someone who had lived through it. Strength begins with knowing your silence is not weakness. It is your sharpest tool. Each client reminded me that my revenge had grown into something larger than myself. It was no longer only my victory, it had become a blueprint for others. At night, the house felt lighter. Amelia's laughter carried through phone calls from her new job in Charleston, and the walls no longer echoed with Gregory's restless footsteps. For 28 years, he believed my silence meant submission. Now he sat alone, in a modest apartment, surrounded by the silence he had created for himself. People often imagine revenge as fire, chaos, shouting, broken glass. But my revenge was not destruction. It was precision. It was patience. It was letting Gregory believe he had written my ending, only for him to discover I had already written his. I did not throw a scene. I did not beg or plead. I simply handed him an envelope, and the live stream made sure the truth could never be hidden. The evidence did the rest, because sometimes the sharpest blade is dignity, and sometimes the loudest scream is composure. Looking back, I realize I never wanted to destroy Gregory. What I wanted was to protect myself, to protect Amelia, to prove that betrayal does not get the last word. The real lesson is this: you do not have to meet cruelty with chaos. You can meet it with strategy. You can choose the battlefield. And when you do, the outcome belongs to you. So I leave you with this question, one only you can answer. Was this revenge too harsh, or was it justice finally served? I want to hear what you think. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Because every story like this is not just mine. It is a mirror. And maybe somewhere you will see a piece of yourself in it.